Thanks for listening to BBB Sharing. This is our podcast. We broadcast we record and broadcast at the Ignite Studios, sparked by BBB. And we get a plethora of guests. Is that a good word, Evie?
Yes, plethora is a good word.
We like to have fun on these podcasts, don't we?
We do.
And this guest is, I know where he works for a number of years, and I'll talk about that later on. But I meet him by chance through another good friend, Chris Lindsay. Chris says, you got to meet this guy, Mr. Grimes. Yeah. And then we did. And then we run into each other at the Chamber Mixer, the Mega Mixer.
Mega Mixer.
Mexico. Yeah. So anyway, again, I'm Barry Moore, and my co-host, my friend is...
Evie Kira George, Director of Ignite, sparked by BBB.
You are sparking this town. I'm telling you, Evie, you are making a huge difference. It's every day. Does some days seem longer than others?
No. I just enjoy every day.
You really do.
I really do. I just have a good time here. Even if there's something like a pushback or comes back around, I make the most of it. It's a learning experience. Rejection is redirection.
You overcome and adapt. Yes, you do. And that's a great thing. And we're going to offer a lot of great things to the community, to all the organizations that are out there, all the companies, but most importantly, consumers, because that's who we work for at the Better Business Bureau also. But with us today, Tim, introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Evie. It's great to be here. I'm Tim Grimes. I'm actually the Associate Director of the Corporate Work Study Business Development Program at Cristo Rey Richmond High School.
And I learned about Cristo Rey years ago when Peter McCourt went around and the school didn't even open, and he spoke at Encorepreneur with Stan Maupin. And it was an incredible, I'll never forget it. And I left there enthused and excited and went back to my partner and said, hey, this is where we should be looking. This is where we should look for our new employees that we want to build maybe 6, 7, 8 years from now. So that, I think I was right because it's working. We didn't do it, unfortunately, at that time, but it's always time. Mm-hmm. But explain what Cristo Rey is all about. How is it different?
Let me get into a little bit about it. And I wrote something down here, so I don't want to sound like I'm reading everything that I'm going to talk about, but just the major things so I get it right. Cristo Rey High School, Cristo Rey Richmond High School is a Catholic learning community that educates young people with limited economic means to become men and women of faith, purpose, and service through a rigorous college preparatory curriculum integrated with the relevant work study experience. Students graduate ready to succeed in college and life. So my background with it, I was introduced to from actually Catherine Whitney from Warren Whitney introduced me to Cristo Rey when the feasibility study was being done, almost 7 years ago now. So I was introduced to them, went to a couple of the committee meetings, and kind of thought this is really something. Plus, it's also Cristo Rey was founded in Chicago. A father, John Foley, founded it in Chicago, and that's my hometown. So I always kind of had a neat connection to that, and I had heard of that through my Chicago connections and so forth down there. Starting in 1996, it is now up to I think we're ready to open another school or two, and there will be up to 40 different schools throughout the nation, all in the same kind of model, and the model being exactly what I had said earlier, that it is obviously strong academics with a work-study component that is also very important, and then kind of from their service and being prepared for the future.
And it is highly successful so far, right? And how do you measure that success? What would the board of directors, what is the success metrics that you look for? Graduation, where they go, where are they in 10 years?
So far, I can tell you what my experience is in being there kind of a short time.
Yeah.
The biggest metric that I've noticed is that we had our first graduating class. So to kind of work through the calendar about how we did things, Cristo Rey was up to speed in, I believe, like 18, 19. Then the pandemic hit, and that really put, even though we stayed open and either did virtual or in-person learning, depending about how they were doing things. So each year added another level, another grade. Obviously started with the freshman. Next year was freshman and sophomore. Following year was freshman, sophomore, junior. And then following year was senior. We graduated our first class last year, and we have 100% college acceptance of the graduates that were there, which is fantastic. And those colleges are anywhere from, I can speak to specifically that, but I know some of the students that I've been working with in tours and things like that. One young lady has a full ride to UVA, and I think she has to pick between either UVA or William and Mary, and another young lady has a full ride to Notre Dame.
Wow.
So that's the high level. There's certainly different levels of ODU is one of the schools. JMU is one of the schools. And I believe even some students may be going to JSARG and doing things like that too. But that 100% graduate or acceptance rate is
100%
fantastic.
is really good,
So that's a
yeah.
pretty good metric, I think, that we can just do. Right now, our enrollment is at 207 students. We have capacity for 350. So my job is to build the relationships with the organizations that may be interested in bringing in those student workers. And enrollment has a big job themselves where they're trying to bring in students to fill the pipeline for those classes in those areas.
Well, I appreciate you getting out into the town, like we met at the Mega Mixer and things you're talking about, because it's just name recognition, and it's going to take 20 years, 30 years, right? But
hope
that's
not.
just the way.
Yeah.
It just takes to become a household name. It takes a generation or two.
Yeah.
That's reality, and you're on the right track. I mean, you got to see if Seton Hall's in there. You know, you should be sending some Catholic
Seton-
boys up to
that-
Seton Hall, New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe I'll check, and maybe we will. I'll get back to you.
I'm
on
a
that.
Seton Hall grad, but I'm an
Great.
Irish Protestant, so I never really fit in at Seton Hall. But, not many Presbyterians there, but
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a great education, great school, and so with Evie as a young lady, when you think about choices you have to put kids into schools, you went through school, the private education versus your mom and dad being told you got to put the kid into public school versus private. Do you think it's worth? Do you wish you ever looked at all these other choices that were out there?
So I did go to private school.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a Mennonite private school in Harrisonburg, Virginia called Eastern Mennonite High School. But it was middle school and high school combined. So I went to a public elementary school. My parents decided to do the private school route. They wanted, my father was a Greek immigrant. My mother grew up with two Greek immigrant parents. They wanted the best education they could give their children. There are pros and cons. The pro, I got a wonderful education. My writing level, my communication skills, next to my classmates at VCU, near exceptional. I'm not tooting my own horn. That's just the education level that I got and something that I noticed while I was studying with other students. However, I became antisocial, closed up. It took a while for me to bounce back into who I was in elementary school. You might like this, Barry. Elementary school, I was the SEO president.
Of course.
I ran twice. I didn't win the first time, but I became vice president. And then I did the morning news every day in elementary school. I loved it. A very outgoing child. But then there was a shift in private school. So there is that pro and con, but Harrisonburg is also a very small town.
Yes.
And I I'm Greek, and I grew up with, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and for a Mennonite private school, they don't understand that. So there was a lot of difficulty with that and learning to assimilate in that school culture. But, I always had my nose stuck in a book, so.
It worked out.
Seemed to
It
work
worked
out,
out.
right?
It's funny, Tiff. So you can look at these different schools that are out there, and again, your job is to get the word out. All your staff wants to raise money. You want to get students in. you want parents engaged, you want companies to sponsor kids because that's the income issue you're dealing with, right? So listen to Evie's story, and I'll share mine in a second. But any thoughts about what she just said, and how to search for a school? Do you have any input on that? Just as not as an employee of the school, just as a human being.
Well, it's interesting. I went to a Catholic elementary school, grammar school, as we called it, and it was 1 through 8. And after that, it was interesting because we lived in the west side of Chicago. But the day I graduated from 8th grade, we moved to Oak Park, which is a suburb right next door to Chicago. My 3 older brothers all went to Catholic high schools. I then went to Oak Park River Forest High School.
Oh.
And you could just see the pros and the cons between that. I wasn't the best student in the world. I wonder if I would have been a better student if I was kind of pushed a little bit and paid attention to and that kind of thing. That's certainly something Cristo Rey Richmond High School is doing. The class sizes are 15 to 20. It obviously is a very hands-on kind of situation. But anyway, so searching, it became pretty easy, I think, for my parents. Maybe they even moved to Oak Park because of the schools. I look at it around this region. Obviously, public schools in Henrico and Chesterfield and Hanover or whatever are seem to be doing better than the public schools in Richmond. And so that's unfortunate because I still have always been I mentored in Richmond schools for about 10 years. And I was always hopeful, and it was interesting that there would be some straight A students that I would be mentoring, and I always thought, why am I mentoring these straight A students that are good athletes, and I want to be like them when I grow up? But it was more so the thought, how are the C and D students doing in the public schools like in Richmond and many other cities that they fall by the wayside, and that's really unfortunate. So yes, making a decision, that's got to be tough, and certainly Cristo Rey Richmond High School comes into play for the fact that the work study provides them the ability to have their pay from the work study goes towards their tuition.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to say it's totally their tuition, but it goes towards their tuition. We also have donors and wonderful donors from the advancement side that also support what we've been doing. If I understand it correctly, so we've been, almost 7 years in Pete McCourt's reign. We've raised about $21 million. So that's fantastic. I'm not sure if that includes the corporate work study, but I think it does. And then obviously donors that do that too. So advancement has a real job on their hands to bring in donors and bring in funds that way. I have a real job along with my boss, Chris, and somebody told me the other day, they said, don't say boss. She's not my boss. She's my colleague that I love working with, that we need to bring in many organizations, nonprofits, corporations to bring those kids into their fold as far as corporate work study. So.
Well, we're getting over our time limit here. So, but I think what you said, it was a great way to finish up. Again, the Better Business Bureau, nonprofit, 1912, international. Very simple. We start with trust, integrity, respect, honesty. And with our Ignite program that Evie's heading up is going to be a place where the community gets together, business owners, accredited businesses, non-accredited consumers, and come in and have direct conversations. And the reason I'm doing this, Tim, is I left Richmond, never was coming back, and somehow, God pulled me back into this position, opened it up.
Just when you thought it was safe, they pulled you back in.
Yeah, exactly. I watched that movie a few hundred times, being a Jersey guy. Yeah, I love The Godfather. But I replaced the Barrymore. That was my sign. That was it, not to retire, to come back. And I came back to a very giving town, supposedly, all these mega corporations and all this money passing hands. But, deaths are going up with fentanyl. Mental health is way off the charts in Central Virginia. The same homeless people are living on the streets. The food bank is giving out more food, not less. We're not feeding people what they need to be fed. I don't mean food. I mean intellectually, that they know how to provide a meal for themselves. Hand up, handouts are out of control. So I took this job, and that's not the role of the BBB, but Ignite it is. And I think with the BBB going with Cristo Rey moving forward in other schools like Cristo Rey or programs, accredited businesses should look to learn more about your program and finding their future worker 2 years after a 2-year a college degree or sponsor them, or 4-year college degree. Every car dealership should be sponsoring 4 or 5 people. I come out of the auto industry in 40 years. I was one of the first people ever to start worrying about the future because I'm more of a visionary. I don't work on today. I'm always really months and years ahead. And it's a problem in some ways, but in my mind, but in other ways, it's a skill or a task that not everybody can do. And I love sharing it. And so I think that your school has a great place for the economic challenges of these students. I think we've walked away from family. I think if we go right, the Fatherhood Foundation in Richmond just brought in Jack Brewer and Chris Beach and Jamal Thomas, Jeff Katz. They had a great breakfast, and I learned a lot. Listen to this guy, Jack Brewer, NFL star, captain of every team he played on, and lives in Florida. And I met him through Dave Bratt, who's up at Liberty. And I just think it all comes back to family. It's that easy. And the schools, public schools, I wish they would talk about it, but they can't. They're talking about so many other really critical things as we watch scores decline and families decline. But I really want to be a conduit or something, a way of communication that we can see things that we never thought possible. And that sounds so corny, but those are great words. I'm actually going to execute it or put it into action.
Great.
So I look forward to working with you. Yeah. So I thank you. And Evie, wrap us up.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to our show, BBB Sharing. Make sure to follow us on Ignite, sparked by BBB Central Virginia, Instagram and Facebook, and follow BBB Serving Central Virginia on LinkedIn to keep up to date on all of our events and fun shows. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.